Welcome to the International Black Summit. This is the International Black Summit monthly podcast where we interview current and past facilitators and participants of the International Black Summit, asking them how they use the summit tools and distinctions in their lives, in their careers, in their families, and in their communities. But tonight you're joining us for a special session. Tonight we're doing a special summit share. So this is an opportunity for people who aren't very familiar with the International Black Summit to find out about us, who we are, what we do, how long we've been around, what we create, and what might be available for you by participating in the International Black Summit. So I'm Grace Lawrence. I'm one of the co-facilitators or co-hosts of our monthly podcast session. And I'm with our co-host, my co-host here tonight, Glenn. You want to say anything, Glenn?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome.
And we also have with us, we'll have with us two guest facilitators tonight. First, I'll pass it over to Glenn to introduce who's going to be joining us tonight to guest facilitate with us.
Absolutely. So we've got Lorraine, Dr. Rain Warren, PhD. Dr. Rain is a facilitator, educator, consultant, and psychologist in peace building, dialogue, and conflict mediation. Dr. Rain's first annual summit event was in 1992, and she joined the adult IBS facilitator body the same year. And if you want to find out a little bit more about her also, she's featured on one of our previous podcasts. The second guest host would be Trevor Wilson. He's the creator of Human Equity TM and founder and president of TWI Inc., a leading firm in the field of diversity, inclusion, and human equity. Peter's been participating in the International Black Summit since 1990s and is a member of the adult facilitator body. And he will be joining us momentarily. He's got some technical issues, so he'll be joining us a little later on. So with that, back to you, Jackie Grace.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks. So, so we do have live participants with us tonight. So if you're here with us tonight and you want to just type into the chat what you would like to find out about the International Black Summit or any questions that you have about the International Black Summit, please do. Because the purpose of tonight's session is to really tell you a little bit about us. So we're going to talk and go through a number of different spaces. We'll talk a little bit about the history of the International Black Summit. We'll talk about what's available through the International Black Summit, what's available through us in 2023. We'll talk a little bit about who we are, what we do. We'll talk a little bit and spend some time in the International Black Summit Declaration, which is a foundational tenet of the International Black Summit, what our purposes are, and we'll also talk a little bit about our courses and events, including our annual summit event, which happens the first full weekend in August each year. So if you have any questions and you're with us in the live, please do type your questions into the chat. But let's start a little bit with our history. And with us tonight, we have Rain Warren, who was at one point our official International Black Summit historian. And so I just want to welcome you, Rain, and invite you to share a little bit about the International Black Summit history and how we came to be.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Glenn. Now, as soon as someone says history, people go to a place. I want to take you away from that place. And I want you to think about the history. I have a couple of ways I want you to sort of listen to the history. Well, first of all, I want to tell you, you might be saying, what is the summit? For people who've never heard of it or never been to the summit. If you could imagine 500 people in a room and someone asked that question, what is the summit? And a young girl, she was about 7 or 8 years old. She came to the mic and they said, she has an answer? What is the summit? People were trying to figure that out. And she said, they said, what is the summit? She said, a bunch of Black people sitting in a room talking. So the summit is a conversation. And it's true. If you were a fly on the wall, you would see a bunch of people of Black African descent sitting in a room engaged in a powerful conversation. And there are three things I want you to think about as I'm sharing the history. One, the power of a conversation, because the summit started inside of a conversation between two women. I want you to think about that no one person is responsible for the International Black Summit. So think about the power of community. And then the third thing, I would like to acknowledge all of the people who were responsible for the International Black Summit from the past. Some of them have transitioned to be ancestors. But everything that you experience and you see in the summit was a group of powerful people. Some of them are still around. So I want to acknowledge people from the past, people from the present who are presently very much involved, that might be you, and people in the future, because the history lives in all of those places. And as I'm describing the history, I'm going to share the screen in a moment and read to you a couple of paragraphs. It's the Reader's Digest version. It's the tip of the iceberg. I'm giving you a little taste of it. As I'm sharing, if I could mention all of the names of the people who are responsible, it would take us all night. So thank you. And I mean that literally, thank you. Thank yourself. So the history of the International Black Summit. So this is an official history that was compiled and written by myself. And I consulted with people like Catherine Copper, Aloma Marquis, Perry Parks, Anthony Randolph, Dawson Randolph, Robin Randolph, Kaumba Johnson, people who were there in the beginning. Malika Redmond, Pat Reed Porter, Falami Saunders, and Kenneth Young. And I want to especially acknowledge Darlene Saunders, who was the first person who held the accountability of Summit historian, and Lenard Bragg for a lot of technical support and resources that she provided in creating the conversation of this history. So let's go. The conversation of the International Black Summit arose as Pat Reed Porter was participating in the Landmark Education Corporation seminar called Productivity, Service, and Wellbeing. Aloma Marquis had completed the seminar a year earlier and allowed Pat to stay in her home while Pat completed the course. Aloma and Pat, along with several other participants, were waiting at a bar in a restaurant to have dinner to celebrate the completion of the seminar when they continued a conversation they had been engaged in to bring transformation to the Black community. Now, this is the juicy part. At the time, Aloma was in the middle of a divorce and Pat Reed Porter was in the middle of planning her wedding. And Pat asked the question, what would it take to heal the relationship between Black men and Black women? She was so heartbroken that Aloma was getting a divorce because she, a side note, she fell in love with her husband. She said, oh, this is a great guy. And now you're getting a divorce? Aloma's commitment was that people of Black African descent have a place to express their humanity and not be abused for it, to be fully self-expressed. As she engaged in this conversation, they got very excited and shared with others in the bar. And some of the people you may know, Joe Hampton, again, Kat Copper, Linda DeBose, Susan Hill, now Liverpool, Leslie Olabisi Butcher, Alan Carter, and others. They continued to have conversations with graduates. And when I say graduates, graduates of the Landmark Forum around the country via three-way telephone calls. The three-way calls became so large with more than 20 people that they eventually decided that they had to meet in person. And so they began contacting graduates from around the country, from Atlanta to California, Texas, like everywhere they could find graduates. They wanted to share the conversation with their community about how do we bring transformation to the Black community. So there was a call that they had that got so big, and this was during the time when we had like the three-way calling. So they would do a telephone tree, like, okay, you call Glenn, and then Glenn calls this person, and then you call this person. It just got too crazy, it got too big. And so they decided that they need to meet in person. And so they met in person let me back up, the first gathering of these landmark graduates engaged in intensive conversation to design and create what became the conversation of the International Black Summit. The foundation for the structure, practice, and format of the summit were created in that Chicago meeting. They met in Chicago. The group came away from Chicago gathering with a commitment to hold an event in Atlanta, Georgia in October of 1991, the Black Summit. The first summit was called the Black Summit and centered around the question, what does it mean to be Black? So represented in the room were people from throughout the African diaspora, including the American, North America, West Indies, some people from Africa, from all over. And I'm gonna stop sharing right now. And I did on purpose skip some paragraphs. So some people were like, what did you do? I did that on purpose. So when they gathered in Atlanta, the conversation was powerful and people came from all over the place. And so they were like, well, why did you have to call it Black? I'm not Black, I'm African. Or I'm not Black, I'm not American, I'm from Jamaica, I'm from Canada. Well, I am from Africa and I am African. And then the conversation got really, really heated. And they started talking about what is it to be Black? What is it to be African? Like, who are we? Why are we here, even here? What are we doing? And at some point, the conversation got so heated that they literally thought people were gonna come to blows with each other. And then something shifted in the room and people started powerfully speaking their vision. And there were a small group of people who had the foresight, one of them being Olubode Sean Brown and Charles Robinson. They started to take notes. And so when they gathered all these notes together, they went to the side, they listened to everything everyone said, and they wrote the notes down and they presented it back to the room. And so the room looked at what was created, and that became the declaration of the International Black Summit. So that declaration was created by all of the people who were there gathered in that room. And when I've heard people who were there describe the energy in the room, some people say that declaration was channeled through spirit, because they said it was like chaos, and then all of a sudden it was peace, because people started to say, we declare ourselves, our community, and all communities whole and complete. There's nothing to do except be. We assert that we are responsible for generating community as possibility and we listen for and grant being to the possibility and creation of unpredictable results. Our conversation of, about, and for those of African descent is one of power, self-generation, abundance, responsibility, unity, and integrity with the possibility of being. We stand for the expression of our spirituality, ending the murders of our men, women, and children, building economies responsible for funding our community, maintaining wellness of being in our bodies, providing human services, establishing nurturing relationships, altering the conversation of who we are in the media, empowering our youth. We declare that our community manifests itself in the world as a contribution in the transformation of the universe. And that happened in that conversation with a community of people from around the world in October 1991. And since that time, the summit, the International Black Summit, has gathered around the world on the first weekend in August. South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Antigua, Jamaica. Every time I say Jamaica Summit, I'm like, whoo, Jamaica, New York, Toronto, all over the world. And there's also an International Black Youth Summit, which we'll speak about a little bit later. But I just want to underline that it started with a conversation. What conversations are you starting? People start conversations in the summit. It started with community. And not one single person is responsible for everything. We all stand on the shoulders of others who have said yes to the International Black Summit. So that's what I got. That's a Reader's Digest version. It could be I could talk for hours about the history. You got a little touch because there's some background stories. You got to hear those later, much later. So that's that.
Well, I know, looking at the history, I know that there are some, well, Glenn, you have a question that you want to ask people who are listening right now.
Well, I really wanted to find out if people can put it in the chat. What was their first annual summit event? What was the location, the city, and the country? Because we've been around quite a few places. So please put that in the chat. Your first.
Well, I'll answer that question.
Event. Go ahead.
My first annual summit event was in 1999, and it was in Jamaica.
Jamaica. Yes.
It was that Jamaica summit. And I see some, so we have people listening right now, some of whom have completed and participated in the International Black Summit, and some who have known absolutely nothing about the International Black Summit. So if you've never attended, you can't answer this question, but certainly there are people listening right now who can put in the chat what their answer is. I'm seeing some who say 1994 in New Orleans, somebody who was in the 1991 Atlanta event like that. So for me, it was 1999 in Jamaica. And each year in the annual summit event, which is not our only event, we have other courses as well, but in the annual summit event, we end that summit event, annual event, with a question or an inquiry for the year to engage in until the next annual summit event, when a new question or inquiry is generated. And so I know for my early events, there were a couple of questions that still ring out for me, the annual question, one of which was, who am I being as the conscious creator of my life and community? That one was a real eye-opening one for me at that time in my life, and engaging in that question for a whole year. Who am I being as the conscious creator of my life and community? And engaging in that question for the year until the next annual summit event. That had a powerful impact on me at the time. And then another one around that time was, what is it? What's available by consciously owning all that I create? So both of them were, for me, really about living my life from a level of consciousness that I hadn't up until that point. And also, the second one really had me take a look at a whole different level in terms of taking ownership and responsibility for what I create in my life and in my community. So how about you guys? What about you, Glenn?
I'm going to bring Peter. Go ahead and start your video and unmute yourself. And while I do that.
Okay. Other locations in the chat. First summits, 1993 in Oakland, California, 2001 in Memphis, Tennessee, 2000 and something, 2001 in Philadelphia. That might have been 2000. Yeah, a number of people were 1994 in New Orleans. Welcome, Peter. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Peter, we're just in the question looking at when was your first annual summit event and where was it? What was the location? So I answered for me.
Grace, let me just put a correction. 2000 was Philadelphia. 2001 was Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh, thank you. So Peter, when was your where and when was your first annual summit event?
So 1994, and my first event was in New Orleans, and it was after another fellow Canadian attended the event in Highland Park, and he came back and he basically wouldn't stop talking about it. He said, "This is the most important, this is the most powerful work on the planet for Black people, presented Black people, pride Black people, about Black people." And he spent 250 days continuing to talk about it. And finally I said, "If you shut up, I will go to this event." And I went in 1994 and realized he actually was right. And I've been back at the summit event pretty well every year since 1993.
Great. And what about you, Rain?
Well, you know, I'm like piggybacking on Trevor, if you shut up. And I didn't say it like that because I had many of my friends invited me to the International Black Summit. And I said no. And I said no again. And I said no. And I was like adamantly, I do not want to be, you want me to sit in a room all weekend with a bunch of Black people? I declined, not interested. And they kept asking me. And so finally, and out Rosa Waldron and Byron Johns, they kept asking. And so Byron called me and he asked me again, he said, "I'm just gonna ask you one more time, do you want to come to the summit?" And I said, "Byron, if you mention that thing to me again, I didn't say block you on my phone, but I said, I'm not gonna talk to you." And I said something about harassment. And he hung up. And when he hung up that phone, I don't know what happened. This overwhelming sorrow. It was just like a cloak. It was just like sorrow came on me. And I said, "Oh my God, please let him call me again." And I was like, "God, let him call me again. Just let him call me again." And at that time, I was just too proud to pick up the phone and say, you know, I made a mistake. I'll come. I want to come. I was like, "Please, God, please let him call me again." And the phone rang and he called me again. He said, "I'm just going to ask you one more time." I said, "Okay, I'll go." Boom. And I ran around my apartment, putting stuff in a bag because the bus, that's a whole nother history. The bus was leaving the next morning, early in the morning. And when I got to the International Black Summit, the first thing I did, I walked into the Thursday night event. There's a Thursday night event where it's a celebration, it's welcoming you to the city. And mine was in 1992, Highland Park, Michigan. And I just started crying. I mean, at the time I was working in a corporate situation. I wasn't around too many Black people, you know, and I went to Landmark, I wasn't around that many. And I was like, I couldn't stop crying. So some of the people at that summit, they were saying the woman who was crying from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And Monday, when I got back home, I was still crying. And they were like, are you okay? You know? And what I was present to was the beauty of Black people. I fell back in love with Black people. I saw this Black man weeping and just being so vulnerable and just sharing his love for his mother. And I had never seen that before. It just shifted my whole notion of Black men. And I didn't even know I had a notion about Black men, but that got revealed. You know, in that summit, I felt like the ancestors was with us, and some of us could see the ancestors and feel them. And the people from Kenya sang to us, welcome home, welcome back to yourself. They were singing a welcome song that is a traditional song that they sing in Kenya.
What year was that, Rain?
1992. And they said, you are kings and queens. We are kings and queens. And it was just so moving to me that you know, and so since that time, you know, I became a facilitator of the summit. And I just want to mention the foundational questions, the first 3 questions. The first one that and every year we leave the summit with a question. So the first question that they left with was, who am I in relationship to the Black community? What is it to be Black? So they engaged in that conversation for a year. And then in the next summit, that Highland Park summit, we left with this question. What must I transform within myself in order to transform the world? Whoa. And then the third question was 1993, Oakland, California. Who or what must I be in order to transform the Black community and the world? So these were like conversations. And so it went from the personal I all the way to the world, and then you know, it gets deeper as the years go forward. And we've had 33 years that this conversation has been going on, all volunteers, for the most part, volunteers, people just generating themselves inside of a conversation. And it's still going on. All people of Black African descent present and in the room or virtual.
Absolutely. Peter, unmute yourself and stay unmuted. So
right.
I wanted to I was actually at the first summit.
Yes, you were.
And there were 8 of us, and we got the call. I got the call in New York from J. Kenneth Young. He said, Glenn will be able to let the people know in New York about the summit. And we had a group called People of African Descent Empowerment Group, and we had organized ourselves and were training ourselves around different leadership roles so that we could bring to the community the conversation called International Black Summit. And so when we got this call that something was happening in Atlanta, it's like, okay, we've got to be there. And there was, like I said, there was 8 of us from New York that arrived. And the thing that I always say about it is when I walked in the room, I got present to my own humanity.
Wow.
I got, you know, here was 132 people of Black African descent inside a conversation called how can we impact our community? We didn't know each other. We hadn't really, you know, some of us had talked, some of the organizers had talked, but I walked into a room of people that I didn't know, but I felt the love, I felt the commitment, I felt the passion, and that was able to carry me till today. So I'm still in the conversation loving the opportunity for these kinds of conversation with people that are positive, that are riveting and moving things forward. So I'll stop there for now. Folks in the chat, I haven't seen a whole lot. Anybody else want to share when their first annual event was? And
Glenn, I want to underline your share that once people have been touched by the International Black Summit, it never leaves you. The experience, the conversation, it never leaves you.
that is so true. That is.
I just wanted to add that, you know, this is not, I started in 1994, and I never really had joined anything up until then. And I had no intention of joining this at all. I mean, the whole conversation about Black people. I remember actually talking to the gentleman that had asked me to join. I said, I don't do Black stuff anymore. It's like, you know, it's now, I'm going to go into business. And it was interesting watching from the Thursday night, which, as Rain says, is a major opening a party, if you will. By Saturday afternoon, I could physically feel love in the room. And it was like something that I had never actually experienced in any kind of event. I've done a lot of personal development stuff. And, you know, the fact that I'm still here in 2023 really is a tribute to the power of this work, in my opinion.
That's great. So what we're going to do next, we're going to actually share like what I'm going to do a screen share about what is available in the summit. So there are quite a few things, but the summit is an event that takes place during the first weekend in August each year, attended by people of Black African descent who are committed to the unfoldment of the Declaration in their lives. It's also a gathering of people of Black African descent from diverse backgrounds, countries, lifestyles, opinions, and views who come together to celebrate and empower the vision of the Declaration. It's also an exploration of questions and issues which empower participants to realize their vision for the Black community in the world. And we talked a little bit about that. We do have a different conversation each year, and we stay in that conversation for the entire year. It's also a place to clear yourself so as to be able to hear what life is telling you. And we're not going to get into it tonight, but it's part of how we begin to, one of the distinctions that we use, one of the tools that we use inside the International Black Summit, just to ground ourselves and to be clear so that life can speak through us. And it's also a place of acknowledgement, praise, and celebration of who we are as people and the contribution we are to the world. Lastly, but not leastly, a global shift in the conversation about who people of Black African descent are in the world. Back to you, Jackie Grace.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. Could you put that back up for a little bit?
I
just want to ask those who are with us live to just type in, if you could make that section a little bit bigger. Just type in, if there's 6 items there, to just type in, of those 6 items, are there 1 or 2 that kind of jump out at you? So it's, you know, what's available through the International Black Summit, an event and events and courses. There's the annual event, which is our flagship event, but it's not our only event. We also have other courses and events as well. So it's events and courses, including the annual event, the first weekend. So that's one of the 6, or gatherings of Black people from diverse backgrounds, etc., who come together to celebrate and empower the vision of the Declaration, or exploration of questions and issues. That exploration, is that what jumps out to you? Or having a place to clear yourself so that you can hear what life is telling you. Is that what jumps out? You know, whatever jumps out to you, if there's something that jumps out to you, just throw it in and type it in the chat. or acknowledgement, praise, and celebration of who we are as a people and the contribution we are to the world, or a global shift in the conversation about who people of Black African descent are in the world. Like, is there one that jumps out to you? And if so, just throw it in the chat. And I'll just ask Rain, Glenn, and Peter. I'll say for me, the one that in this moment, and it could change tomorrow, it could change in another moment, but the one that jumps out to me right now is having a place to clear myself so that I can hear what life is telling me. That is something that the Black Summit, the International Black Summit, has been for me since I began participating years ago. In addition to all of these other things, the exploration of questions and issues is also a big one for me. So what about you guys? Are there one or two of these that jump out for you?
Well, I'd have to say for myself, the acknowledgement and praise and celebration of who we are. I get to be with powerful Black people making things happen in communities all over the world. And for me, that's just a phenomenal conversation that's inside of my vision for economic development to be available to all of us. And so I get to be part of that, and my job is part of that, and my life really is part of that. Rain or Peter?
Thank you.
I would just say it's probably the last one, a global shift in the conversation about who we are as Black people of Black African descent. You know, it was interesting that one of the reasons I came to the 1994 summit was to try and watch Black people do landmark education and actually fail at it. I mean, I was like, we can't do landmark. And I remember sitting there in 1994, and it was supposed to start at 9 o'clock in the morning, and didn't start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Or I thought it didn't start. People were dancing. People were having, I'm going to call it socializing, etc. And the shift in the conversation started at that point. And the one thing that I rely on for the summit is leaving the annual event with a global shift, with a shift in who I know my people to be. And at the bottom line, it's moving from a negative perspective to a positive perspective. So that's what I have relied on since 1994 as it relates to this conversation.
Thanks, Peter. Rain, what about you?
Well, you know, I could talk about each one of these, and I really want to underline a gathering of people from diverse backgrounds, cultures. The summit is not a religious organization, and you have people who are religious, you have people who are spiritual, you have people who are tree huggers. You know, you have people who have every expression of humanity, and they have in common, they're of Black African descent. And the viewpoints can be from one scale to the other scale. That's powerful. Very diverse, very diverse collection of people. And also the whole exploration of questions and issues that empower people. We may not talk deeply about our distinctions tonight. However, everyone who comes to the summit leaves with a set of distinctions or tools, equipment that they can use, that we can use in our lives to just about clear yourself on anything that you might face in life. It's an inquiry, it's a conversation, it's a deep conversation, it's an opportunity to share deeply with people from diverse backgrounds. And I'm speaking, but I'm hesitating because of the time, but that's the main power, diverse people and inquiry what you think it is. And even what I think it is, having participated for all these years, when I come to the summit, I don't know what it's going to be because the conversation unfolds in the room. And sometimes people say, well, who are the speakers? Who are the presenters? It's not that conference. You are the speakers. Whoever's in the space is the speakers. We have facilitators who may be all over the room, and facilitators facilitating the conversation in the room, but one participant can stand up and share something that shifts the whole conversation and takes it to a whole nother category of space. And I just also want to finally mention Landmark Education Corporation. From the first 5 years of the summit, the Landmark Forum was a prerequisite to be able to participate. And in 1995, the International Black Summit created our own prerequisite because we saw that we needed to do that. And also to just clarify, we've never used landmark distinctions. All of the distinctions of the International Black Summit were created by listening the room, listening the space in the room, and then we generate our distinctions from, hey, what did I say earlier? Not one person, but a community of people in a conversation creating together and listening.
As Peter's muted right now, but one of the things that Peter was always amazed about, and it really speaks to that listening that we talked about, there's no manual. So we are facilitating, but we're learning with you. We're allowing the conversation to come up in the space, and we work through it together. So it's not like I've got something for you and you got something for me. We're in it together, discovering what's possible, discovering what's available, discovering new insights into being Black. So just want to say that. Back to you, Jackie Grace.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. Yeah. So let's move next to share screen about what the International Black Summit is, and then take a closer look at the declaration. But I will note that we have people sharing in the chat, talking about what aspects of what's available through the summit that jumps out to them. So we have a number of people referring to having a place to clear, or others referring to a global shift in the conversation about who people of Black African descent are in the world.
Grace, can I say something about that?
Pardon me?
I want to say something about what people say, a place to clear. So the outcome of being in a clearing conversation in the summit, sometimes people are in the summit, and inside of that clearing conversation, they start businesses, take on leadership roles. We've had people now decide to run for government office and win. Some people decide to get married, and some people have met in the summit, and we've had summit babies. And some people have decided that, this relationship is done. I'm going to get a divorce. Some people might quit their job and start a whole new career because they got inside of the clearing that they weren't living authentically in their life, and they wanted to bring themselves forward authentically in life. New relationship with families. Just, if you can think of a possibility, and myself, every time for many years, the Monday after the International Black Summit, my phone will always ring, and I had a huge contract or possibility or something that would open up for me. So once you're in that clearing, your life opens up, and then whatever that thing that was being blocked, it gets unblocked, and so you're available to participate fully. That's how I see it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I changed careers inside of getting clear in this,
Wow.
in the International Black Summit. Absolutely. All kinds of things are possible in terms of really living life from a place of the depth of who you really are, and layers of it, getting closer and closer to my most authentic self-expression. Layers, 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 and getting closer and closer.
And even Black people who said, you know, I'm just not around Black people. I don't know any Black people. And they come there and like, oh my God, I'm Black. I should bring my Black back.
Well, you know, it really is a great space to do that. You know, the International Black Summit Incorporated is a 501c3, 100% volunteer-led organization founded by, attended by, and delivered to people of Black African descent, committed to empowering and transforming the lives of people of Black African descent around the world. Since 1991, we've had annual events on 4 continents, 11 countries, and 27 cities.
Wow.
And if you can also scroll to the top of that page, Glenn.
Okay.
So the top of the page there where it talks about what the International Black Summit is. You know, we've already talked about this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a conversation being given by life to the world through people of Black African descent. The conversation finds expression in the declaration of the International Black Summit.
Great. So let's go to the declaration then. And while you do that, I'm also noticing that a number of people put that acknowledgement, praise, and celebration of who we are as Black people is what jumped out of them for them in terms of what's available through the International Black Summit. So the declaration of the International Black Summit. Peter, if you're there, I'm going to ask if you would be available to generate the declaration of the International Black Summit. And for everyone who's listening, I'm going to ask you to well, Glenn, do you want to ask this question?
No, go ahead.
So for everyone who's listening, as Peter's generating the declaration, I want to ask you to think and listen for what part of the declaration resonates with you the most. What part of it resonates with you the most? Or if you were one of the creators or drafters of the declaration, which section of the declaration would you have written? So what jumps out to you the most? Okay, Peter, are you available for that?
I am. The declaration of the International Black Summit. We declare ourselves, our community, and all communities whole and complete. There is nothing to do except be. We assert that we are responsible for generating community as possibility and distinction. We listen for and grant being to the possibility and creation of unpredictable results. Our conversation of, about, and for those of African descent is one of power, self-generation, abundance, responsibility, unity, and integrity with the possibility of being. We stand for the expression of our spirituality, ending the murders of our men, women, and children, building economies responsible for funding our community, maintaining wellness of being in our bodies, providing human services, establishing nurturing relationships, altering the conversation of who we are in the media, empowering our youth. We declare that our community manifests itself in the world as a contribution in the transformation of the universe. Atlanta, Georgia, October 7th, 1991, April 2nd, 2023, wherever there are people of African descent. A moment of silence, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. So yeah, just asking everyone who's listening to just think about which part of the declaration, if you could put it back up there, Glenn, which part of the declaration really jumps out at you? Which part, if you had been drafting it, is like, yeah, I would have written that part. Part would have come from me. You know, an example we have, somebody wrote in the chat, ending the murders of our men, women, and children. That's something that she might have written, you know. So how about you guys, Rain, Glenn, Peter? What part of the declaration jumps out at you as other people have the opportunity right now to chat, type in the chat what jumps out to them, what resonates the most with them?
Rain,
Yes.
what resonates the most?
Well, right now in my life, we declare ourselves, our community, and all communities whole and complete. There's nothing to do except be. And particularly that second line, there's nothing to do except be. Sometimes people read that and they think there's nothing to do. But what I've gotten clear about in my participation in life and in participation in the summit, that my beingness gives me what there is to do. Powerfully. When I'm being present, being listening, being my spirituality, what there is to do comes to me like whispers. What there is to do comes to me like my ancestors calling me forth. What there is to do comes from such a pure place that when I take action from that place, there's ease, there's grace, there's resources. Everything that I need shows up with impeccability. So there is nothing to do except be, and I listen as I'm being for what there is to do. So that comes through for me loud and clear in this moment. In another moment, it may shift.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about the declaration. It's a movement. It occurs at different points of time where you are. It jumps out at you. Peter, unmute yourself and
I think there's two sides to it. We stand for the expression of our spirituality. So when I first started in the summit, I didn't even know what the word spirituality meant. I didn't distinguish between spirituality and religion. And my time since 1994 in the summit has allowed me to understand truly what spirituality is about and its relationship with source. The last is empowering our youth. So I'm a father. In 1994, I was the father of one, Alex Wilson. I'm now the father of three. And when I saw the declaration, I thought that there's an opportunity for me as a father to share this with Alex. And I've been blessed, I think, that Alex and I shared the summit pretty well up until the time he was around, I'd say 18 years old. And I watched him grow and I watched him flourish in a community of Black people supporting other Black people. Let me just put in from a personal perspective, the folks on this call, other Black fathers who supported me in empowering my youth. Glenn, you'd be one of them, and others. And there was probably no other place that I could go to be sourced for that. And you know, the declaration is so far-reaching, and I've heard people say, well, you know, what are you really committed to? That's a lot of stuff, but really what it comes down to is we're committed to all of it, and different parts of that declaration speak to you year by year. And for me, this empowering our youth is a constant that I rely on. pretty well every year since 1994.
Yeah, thank you, Peter Trevor. So for me, altering the conversation of who we are in the media is a huge conversation that propels me forward. And the other one for me is building economies responsible for funding our community. When I look around and see how, that conversation of kings and queens, I'm reminded of the richness of the kings and queens. And sometimes I don't always see that in our community. And so those are the conversations that I've dedicated my life to having an impact in. And there are times when empowering my youth or establishing nurture relationships. So there, as Rain said earlier, at different moments in time, there are different aspects that jump out at us and at me personally. So I get to hold the whole declaration and get to play with it and to explore different aspects of my life as I engage in the different portions of the declaration.
I'll say for me, the section that's jumping out to me in this moment, like we say, it shifts moment to moment, is our conversation about, and for those of African descent is one of, and then for me, I include all of them, but the ones that are really jumping out to me tonight are abundance and responsibility. There's something for me about abundance and responsibility that feel connected to me in this moment. And for me, there just feels like so much is available by being fully open to abundance, and yet at the same time accepting that I can be responsible for generating that for the community, for myself, for my family, for my community, for the world. So,
Grace, there's something that came as people were sharing their aspect of the declaration. I believe that at the International Black Summit event, the declaration comes alive. And I'm thinking of a moment in the summit where this gentleman stood up and he said he'd never been hugged by another man. Like that part about nurturing relationships. And it was just like the share was so intimate and so deep. And suddenly, every man in the room went up to him and surrounded him and hugged him. You couldn't find a dry eye in the room because it was just like a moment that was so surreal. And I've experienced surreal moments in the summit where people move from inspiration. And I also really want people to get that in the summit, you may have someone who's Christian, Jewish, they're Black Jews, Muslim, tree huggers, Buddhists, every expression. So that expands also the notion of what is it to be Black? We participate. You can't just put Blackness in a box and say we are this. It's complex and dynamic. And that's another thing that I've gotten out of my being in the International Black Summit.
Great, thank you. Jackie Grace, you're muted.
Thank you. I was thanking you, Rain, for sharing that and adding atheists to the list.
Yes.
Like all kinds of different religious expressions or expressions of no religion. Rain, you're here, you refer to the ancestors a lot. And There are some people who participate in the summit who would never refer to the ancestors. And there's this space for all of it. There are some people who refer to spirit a lot, some people who refer to God, some people who refer to Jesus, some people who refer to Muhammad, some people who refer to source, you know what I mean? Like, or some people refer to whatever whatever they refer to. Like, it's just, there's space for all of it, which is, one of the things that you pointed to for me is the limitations of language. The summit is an experience. The summit conversation is a conversation. It's an experience. And our events and gatherings happen at the level of experience. And for me, happen at the level of energy. And so there's limitations on being able to use words or language to express something that happens as an experience. And that same experience can be described completely differently
for one person
by people who are in that same experience, because we're searching for the words to describe an experience.
Yes.
So
and I want to add that another thing a facilitator of the International Black Summit will ask you to do is notice what has you checked out of the conversation. Oh, they're talking about the ancestors. I got to go to the bathroom. I'm not going to be with that. Just notice when you check out, because that may be a place to clear yourself, to see what life is saying to you about that thing, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who shared in the chat. We'll go through some of that, but I think it's time for us to take a look at
the purposes.
The purposes, and then actually take a look at the annual summit event, because we're closing in on our time here. So let's keep it rolling. As you do that, I'm just going to mention a couple of the items from the declaration that people dropped into the chat, including ending the murders of our men, women, and children, nurturing relationships, building economies, generating community as possibility and distinction, our conversation about those of African descent, including all of the list of, power, self-generation, abundance, all of that, standing for our spirituality and everything in that paragraph, empowering our youth, expression of spirituality, nurturing relationships, a new narrative about who we are in the media, a comment here about our diversity as Black people being seen as a threat because diversity is less controllable, but we have the capacity, we can embrace our diversity. It's part of our humanity that's sometimes disregarded. And one of the things that I find particularly attractive about the International Black Summit is the capacity of the space to hold that diversity and be with all of it. All of the different ways that we show up in the space is all good.
Absolutely. It sure is. And so as you listen to the purpose, and we have multiple purposes because we've got multiple spaces that occur inside of the summit simultaneously. So listen for the spaces that are here being created for your empowerment, for your vitalization as a person of Black African descent. So the purpose of the International Black Summit is to provide an opportunity for participants to bring into being their vision for the Black community and the world. And as you'll note, vision is a very important part of the conversation that we have here at the International Black Summit. I'm going to give you the purpose of the Young Adult Summit. The purpose of the International Black Young Adult Summit is to provide an opportunity for participants ages 8 to 35, a space for reflection, communication, mentorship, and growth through vision creation and implementation. This conversation empowers young adults to powerfully transition to adulthood, equipped for global success. And just to give you just a little quick aside, the young adult space got created inside of a conversation when we went to Africa. And in Africa, what they said to us, well, youth, what do you mean you're cutting them off at 17? our youth are youth until they're 35. And so one of the youth participants aged out of the youth summit and actually created the young adult space, so that there's a space so that young adults can kind of find themselves, and within their own group, have conversations to empower themselves and to take it to the next level. Last but not least is the purpose of the International Black Youth Summit, which exists to facilitate the self-expression, empowerment, and transformation of young people of African descent. We are young people making our visions real in our communities by exemplifying the principles of youth empowerment, transformation, and love as a powerful approach to the universe. So the thing I want to say about that, the Young Adult Summit actually got generated in 1994 when parents, we talk about bringing their young people to the International Black Summit, decided that they wanted to have a space for themselves to, again, conversate, just like the young adult space got generated, and they developed their own curriculum. So there were 2 youth that were principal in having this conversation forward, and it was Malika Redmond and Falami Saunders who spearheaded the youth and used that year to train themselves to be facilitators for the International Black Summit, and in 1995 had the first youth summit. And they have their own distinctions as well as some of the distinctions that are used throughout the body of the International Black Summit. In fact, Rain was talking about when you are not present and you want to go to the bathroom. So in the youth summit, they call that a quick fix. So you're doing a quick fix to not be present to whatever the conversation is going. So lots of spaces simultaneously occurring. And we're going to talk a little bit now about the summit space itself. Jackie Grace?
And Glenn, I'm going to put in the chat, there were 10 youth who declared themselves and made a commitment to generate their vision and support of the International Black Youth Summit.
Yes. Ranging from 16 on down to 8.
And I just want to add acknowledgement of all of the parents of these youth, because some of them came to the summit when they were 8 and 9 years old, and they grew up in the summit. And they are now CEOs of organizations, activists, prolific authors and writers, parents, business owners, entrepreneurs. They are making their vision real. And it's very powerful. And when I've had the opportunity to be with them in their space, they acknowledge that the International Black Summit is what gave them their voice and empowered them to be who they are in the world. Powerful young people. Well, not so young anymore, but
Thank you, Rain. Thank you. So let's take a look at some of our courses and events, particularly the annual summit event. Are we ready to go there?
I think we are.
Okay, good. So we've mentioned a couple of times that we have the annual summit event. We also have some other courses. We have a one-day prerequisite course, which is a one-day standalone course that is held periodically. It's often held in response to a request for a prerequisite one-day course. So we have that. We also have something that is called the Community and Regional Events Team that has a course called The Power of Community Transformation. So that course is also a course that is sometimes offered and available. We have some free, and those are courses which require registration and a registration fee. We also have a weekly free session. So every Sunday evening at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a free Zoom event and a discussion session, a Sunday summit session. And those sessions are 7:15 p.m. until 9 p.m. Eastern, free. At this, for those of you who are here with us live, it would be at this very same link every Sunday at 7:15 p.m. And once a month, that session is a recorded podcast session where we interview a current or former participant or facilitator of the International Black Summit. And you can find out all of that, about all of those events and all of that information by going to our website, blacksummit.org. And you can also find out about our annual summit event there. So let me do just a quick share about going to the website and finding out a little bit about our courses and events. And then I'm going to ask Peter Trevor to share a little bit about this year's annual summit event. So you can go to blacksummit.org. You'll see a menu at blacksummit.org, different pages, the home page, and then a page for our declaration, a page on About Us that goes through what's available and our purposes, etc. A link to the annual summit event that will come back to, a Give Now page, an events and courses page, a podcast page, etc. So you can go to the podcast page and see past access past podcasts, or you can go to our events and courses page and find out about our events and courses that are available there as well. Okay, so Peter Trevor, if you could just share a little bit about this year's annual summit event for 2023, the first full weekend in August.
Absolutely. So I think probably the biggest thing to know about the annual event in 2023 is that it's the first time in 2 years that we are offering an opportunity to be physically present with each other. Due to COVID, for the last 2 years, the event has been virtual. It's interesting from a facilitator perspective. Some of us thought it wasn't possible to hold the event virtually. And I do remember the last summit, the last day of the last summit, approximately 75 people being on this event after 3 days of intense communication, and folks, pretty well 98% of them engaged, showing themselves up on the on camera virtually. The 2023 event is a single event, but it will be held in 3 locations: Antigua, Buffalo, New York, and virtually. And the reason I think that we're excited is that we have proven that the power of this event is something that can survive without physical interaction, and yet there will be physical interaction at this year's event. And the event usually begins on a Thursday night with a public welcoming event. Folks are encouraged to bring guests and friends and people that may have had no interaction with the summit at all. The event then leads to the Friday, which is the first official day of the summit. And it usually goes from 9 o'clock in the morning to approximately, we usually say until completion, but the reality is that the entire event of the summit goes from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It usually ends approximately around somewhere between 3, maybe 5 p.m., depending on the conversation and depending on where the facilitators feel that the summit is at that time of completion. But it's I think encouraging to assume that this year, as we return post-COVID to a physical event, as well as the virtual event, that we are all looking forward to the opportunity to continue the summit as a single event in 3 locations. And we're encouraged that there is going to be an event that is going to be shared by many, many people who have never had an opportunity to be part of the summer conversation, which again started in 1991.
And
so
I'd like to
Grace.
add, yeah, thank you, Peter. And I'd like to add that the context for this year's conversation is, as I become present to I am, what is to rest in the I amness. So that's the conversation that we've been engaging in throughout this year. And that's what is going to get kind of churned up to bring this conversation for 2023. Back to you, Jackie Grace.
I also want to add, for clarification, in case some people didn't get it, that the summit has operated with a virtual component for many years. I'm not sure when the first year it was virtual, but I know it was virtual since 2014. In Belize, it was virtual. And then I'm not sure what time before that. So we had some foundation and groundedness in being virtual. And then this, with the COVID, it was all virtual. But it's always been, had a virtual, for many years, not always, for many years, a virtual component and in-person component. So acknowledging that team of people.
You're muted, Jackie Grace.
The International Black Summit did start early in incorporating a virtual component. So having the in-person session happening with also having people virtually connected to the in-person session, like you said, as far back as 2014 and possibly earlier. And then the past few years being 100% virtual. And this year, we're going to have this hybrid event, fully incorporating virtual and 2 in-person locations, fully operating as one event. So that's exciting. So I just want to walk through then. I'm not sure if we want to do this Q&A or if we want to go straight to the invitation to register given the time.
I would say that we want to go to the invitation to register.
Okay, let's do that.
Let folks know.
So
get registered.
Yeah, so for some of you who are listening to this may be interested in finding out even more about the International Black Summit, or participating somehow, coming to our free Sunday sessions, or attending a prerequisite course, or attending the annual summit event like that. I will say this, Rain said earlier that that at one point at the very beginning of the organization and the annual event, the landmark forum was a prerequisite to attend the annual event. And then the summit created its own one-day prerequisite. And for a while, it was the landmark forum or the one-day prerequisite was the prerequisite to the event. And then it was only the one-day prerequisite was the prerequisite to the event. And then it became optional to attend the one-day prerequisite the last couple of years. So the one-day prerequisite currently is not mandatory to attend the annual event, but it is highly, highly, highly recommended to take the one-day prerequisite before attending the annual summit event, but it is not currently mandatory. And that could change in the future, but at this moment, it's not mandatory. So
I'm generating the purpose of that prerequisite.
Okay.
To create space of listening to people authentically and being able to enter the room on Friday in the summit fully prepared to engage in the conversation. That's a standalone course that in that prerequisite, you get the opportunity to be trained and to presence the opportunity to listen to people authentically. Authentic listening, like what that makes available in life. And then you go into the whole summit space listening in that way and participating in that way. it's my main analogy is just like a rocket shooting out into the universe.
Absolutely. And also you get, you're introduced to a number of the distinctions that'll be engaged with during the annual event. And so you come in up to speed. You come into the annual summit event up to speed, as opposed to being in the annual event trying to catch up.
Come into your life. What is it? Come into your life.
Trying to catch up. So
life too.
It's highly, highly, highly recommended. And there will be a prerequisite, a one-day prerequisite event. Currently, we have one scheduled for May 2023 and another one scheduled for August 2023. Okay, so for those of you who are interested in finding out more, let me just go to our website and share how you can find out more, and how you can, if you're interested in registering, how you can go ahead and do that. So let me just take back, let me see if my system will do this. Can somebody get to, my system is, let's see what we can do. Okay. So now I'm on the home page of the website, blacksummit.org. So you can just go to blacksummit.org. That'll take you to the home page. If you're interested in the annual event, you just click on our annual event. And that will take you to this page that says, "Attention, people of Black African descent from around the world." If you know that you want to go to where it says, "Join us for the 33rd annual summit event, August 3 to 6, 2023, in Buffalo, New York, Antigua, West Indies, and via video conferencing on Zoom." You know that you want to do that. You already know you want to attend. Click on the orange button to register, and that takes you to the registration page. Here you would fill out your contact information, and also you would select your age category, either senior or adult, or young adult, or youth. You select your age category, and then we'd like you to answer the question, what is your intention for participating in this year's annual summit event? Like, what, having an intention for your participation is really, makes a difference in how we show up at the event. Knowing what your intention is in being there, and having that clarity is useful. And so based on your age group, you would select the corresponding fee category for seniors or adults, young adults, or youth. And then if you're registering as a family or a group, then if you're registering as a family or a group, so you would go down to register as a family or a group. And there are two fee categories when you register as a family or a group that are slightly lower than when you register as a one at a time. And then there's also, if you want to register for a prerequisite course, there's one in May 2023. There's also one in August 2023. And so there, you can also select whether you're registering for the prerequisite as an adult or as a young adult. And if you're registering as somebody who's a member of the Summit Support Program, then you can do that. If you've previously registered, you can do that. You see the registration fees here. The registration fee for a senior is a 55 plus, $250. For an adult, 36 to 54, $300. Young adult, 18 to 35, $250. All of this is in US dollars. Annual summit event, youth, $100. Those are the standard rates. Slightly lower rates if you register as a family or a group. I like that. And then also you would register adult prerequisite or young adult prerequisite. You register up here. For a youth prerequisite, whoops, sorry. It's based on which category you indicate. It shows down here which one you're registering for. You can pay by credit card, or you can pay via PayPal. An event platform fee will be added during checkout. You indicate that you're not a robot And you can click here, yes, I would like to receive your email newsletters if you'd like to receive them. If you don't want to receive them, leave it unchecked. But we'd prefer if you click it. We hope that you would join our mailing list and want to find out more about us. So you would click all of that and then continue. Let me see if it'll let me continue without me filling all of this out. I'll say I'm from Alabama. It might give me an error code because I haven't filled out, error codes. So you would then click that. It would then take you to a payment page where you would either pay via PayPal or pay via credit card. So that's the process for registering for the annual summit event or registering for a prerequisite course or both. You can register. You can also register for both. I think you can also register for both at the same time. Let's see. Actually, it looks like you can't. Okay. So that's the process for registration. I'm going to stop that there. And just want to ask those of you who are listening as we come to a close, those of you who are here with us in person, we're going to have an informal optional question and answer session after the recording ends. But here we will end the recording now. And I just want to invite those of you, the other guest facilitators and my co-host Glenn to share what you'd like to share before we complete this podcast session.
Let's start with you, Rain.
Well, I wanted to just put in the space that the virtual summit component started in 2007. So thanks for putting that in the chat. And also that there's a prerequisite scheduled for Saturday, May the 7th, and that the youth Sunday? Saturday.
Oh, Saturday, okay.
And the youth have no prerequisite. Oh, it's Sunday. Okay, May 7th is correct. So, and just finally, I would like to say that as you're listening to this, wherever you are from listening to it, I feel like it's no accident. Because of the millions of people on the planet who could possibly come to the International Black Summit, you're here and you're hearing the conversation. So that's something to notice. And also, as a facilitator, I would say listen for where you're supposed to be, Buffalo, Antigua, or virtual. And get it, how do I say, get the step in. Don't be like me, waiting for that phone call, begging, please God, let them ask me again, So that's what I have to say. It's no accident that you're here. Don't wait, register. Don't keep it to yourself. Talk to someone about your considerations and play at the summit, because you may be the person to have the stand up in the room and shift this whole thing around for all of us. So that's what I have to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rain.
Thank you. Thank you.
Peter Trevor.
So I just really want to echo what Dr. Rain has said. I spent a year procrastinating on registering for the summit. And ultimately, it turned out that the gentleman that had invited me was absolutely right. And I would just use exactly the same invitation he used, which was, this is, in my opinion, the most powerful work on the planet delivered about Black people, for Black people, delivered by Black people, to Black people. It may sound like hyperbole. It may sound like, okay, well, it's something that should be on a commercial somewhere, but it turns out to be true. And in my opinion, if there's anything that has spoken to you over the last 60 minutes, or anything that occurs to you as you read the declaration, don't wait. Just put yourself in, and the summit will do the rest.
So Trevor,
powerful.
Let me remind them But the very first invitation that went out for people to attend the summit said, do not let anything other than death in your natural body prevent you from being at the International Black Summit. And people were like, death in my body? What?
But that's real.
Co-sign on that.
Absolutely. And that is the thing you want to take your life to the next level with people of Black African descent that you can trust, that you can play with, that can inspire you and be inspired by you. This is the place to come and play. And this is a laboratory that doesn't exist anywhere else on the planet. So come play here with us as we discover together what's possible in creating the universe. Back to you, Jackie Grace. You're muted. You're muted, Jackie Grace.
How many times have I done that tonight? Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight. Thank you, everyone who's with us live with us tonight. We really appreciate you coming, being with us, sharing this, giving us your energy as we go through and create this conversation together. And if you're listening to the recording, in 2023, before August, we hope that you will jump on that train and not have anything prevent you from joining and being with us. If you're listening to us at any other time, you can connect with us. We have that event every year, August, first full weekend in August. And you can connect to us by going to the website. You can find our telephone number there. There's also a contact us page. And if you go to the contact us page, you will be able to complete a form and indicate what you'd like to find out and what you'd like to find out more about us. And it'll just ask you to indicate whether or not you want to find out more about the annual summit event or more about our other courses. I'm just sharing the screen now here on the Contact Us page. So on the Contact Us page, you just give us your name, email, and optionally your phone, and ask us, indicate what you'd like to know about our summit event, our prerequisite courses, our community and regional events, our Sunday Summit shares, the podcast, our leadership body or our facilitator body and training, all of that. Just complete that and send that in to us, and we will get back to you. You can also find our telephone number at the top of that page. So thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight. And we hope that we will see you all again. Thank you for being with us. Have a good night.